waiting on the rock fin, 'cause you're taking forever, forever. Waiting on the rock fin. Thank you.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. So new schedule there for people who didn't hear it last week. We don't stream on Fridays anymore because I need time to work on the documentary. So you guys know I'm working on a documentary. There's a lot of editing that's involved in that. And I'm lucky enough to have an editor that's putting all that jazz together. When it is done, it is going to be great. Based on what I've seen so far, what he's been able to do, he's been doing a really great job. But shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. We have a stellar show for you tonight. The theme is chickens come home to roost. And you'll see what that means when we get into these stories. First and foremost, I do want to give shout outs to people in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. We do have a deep dive today. We do have a good one. Shout out to Brian, says LBJ was installed by a coup. The coup was never corrected. Correct the coup. I hear you there, Brian. Shout out to Vera Hill, who just became a new member. Let's give Vera a big whoop whoop in the house. Greetings, Lauren says F Israel and free Palestine. Shout out to Gup, says love, fire. Sabrina always bringing the fire. Greetings, Hannah, says Sab. Shout out to Ophelia, says hey y'all, congratulations on 200K subs, Sabby, great job. Thank you, and thank all of you guys. I still can't believe it. But we're going to keep on, educating people and doing what we do over here. Shout out to Randy, says hello, Sabby and Revolutionary comrades. Sunday is always better when we're together. Yay. Greetings, K Food Joka says, hi, Sabrina. Shout out to Mark Pugsley says, Sabby. Greetings, Simply Anthony says, hey, Sabby, can't wait for the LBJ piece. Ooh, that one's going to be good. Shout out to Jeanette says, yay. Greetings, of course. My producer, Eric T. Red, says, a big hello to all Sunday Sabsters. Shout out to Roger Meadows for becoming a member on the Sabby Sab show. Give Roger Meadows a big whoop, whoop. Greetings, William says, sup, Sabsters. Shout out to Simon says, yay. Greetings, Verena sends a hello. Shout outs to Fuwa Chan. Hi, chat, and congratulations, Sabby, for 200K. Thank you, Fuwa. And I'm sure that's an anime character that somebody knows out there somewhere. I'm not too well, versed on anime, but I do know some of the anime characters. Greetings, Dublin says, hi, Sabby. Shout out to Do All Things with Love, says doobie doobie doo. Greetings, Aretha says, hi, chat. Hi, Sabby. Shout out to Zen Soulful, Sunday Fun Day. Hello, everyone. Greetings, Steve says, over 200K subscribers. Thank you. Shout out to B says, cute shirt, Sabby. Thank you. It's a very comfortable shirt, too. I don't know about you guys, but for a long time, I've kind of steered away from jean shirts because I feel like they're heavy. At least other ones that I've tried on in the past. But this one's very lightweight, and that's what I like about it. So finally found one that wasn't too heavy. Shout out to Rocky says, hi. Greetings, Kenneth says, you got to cover the drone strikes on Russia and the attack on the train. Civilians died. I will be covering that this week. I'm going to try to have a guest on for that. Hopefully, Mark. I got to reach out to Mark Sloboda. Shout out to Alan says, it's nice to see you on Sunday, Sabs. It's nice to see you too. Greetings, Thon says, oh, snap. What's up, Sabby and fam? I am a chilling here with ya. Greetings, Victoria says, congrats, Sabs. And shout out to Ray says 200K. Wow, great job. I remember watching when it was just a few K. And greetings, C Money says, what's good, Sister Sabby? What is good with you? I see the Tupac picture and I love it. I love it. I love it. Tupac, probably one of my favorite rappers of all time. I say Tupac, Biggie, and Nas, probably my favorite three. We probably put Eminem somewhere there in the top 5, but I don't know. And then I'm very picky about music, very picky about that. So I still listen to a lot of older music. I'm not too big into new music. So if you hear me like promote a new artist, that means I think they're really, really good, like Kendrick Lamar, but for the most part, I like a lot of older stuff. So that is that. All right, ladies and gentlemen. What are we discussing tonight? Well, first and foremost, let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you, fam. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. Don't forget about those Sabsters. They're pretty cool, We also have a group called Sabbies. Hey, hey, hey. And of course, we have members. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate all of you. I saw someone said in the chat, Tupac was Kamala's favorite too. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when she said that, I was like, I don't think this woman actually really was listening to Tupac, but whatever. It is what it is. Tupac is the one that said, they have money for war, but they can't feed the poor. And I know he said that back during the 90s, but it's still very relevant today. And I always feel like Tupac is one of those artists that was way ahead of his time. I really do feel that. And I think that's why they felt they had to get rid of him, right? So the theme again tonight is chickens come home to roost. Let's go ahead and show that thumbnail, ladies and gentlemen. Quite a bit to get into, fam. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and this story, this one with Glenn Greenwald is just, I don't know. It's baffling to me. Like, I think it's absolutely disturbing that someone's privacy is being violated in this way. But we are discussing tonight Glenn Greenwald's smear. I stand with Glenn Greenwald, and I'm pretty sure many of you do. I am against people's privacy being violated. We'll get into all of that, and I'll explain to you why they're coming after Glenn Greenwald. We're also going to discuss, peep this one, fam, if you're concerned about data. Donald Trump taps Palantir. This is very, very, very problematic. And we'll get into the reasons why and what Palantir actually is. Once again, it looks like Whitney Webb was correct. We're also going to discuss a deep dive. We're going to explain how LBJ was able to trap Black Americans. And this is a big one, I think. You know, a lot of times we don't go into, we know that Black Americans are a big voting bloc for the Democratic Party, but a lot of times we don't go into the reasons of why, like how that became to be. And a big part of that was Lyndon B. Johnson. And we're going to get into that and what should have happened instead. We're also discussing, this is a hilarious story. You know, we got to have one that is funny, I think. And that's this one. David Pakman flees. So David Pakman has announced that he may be trying to leave the United States. Oh, I can't wait to get into that. And last but not least, this is a big one. And what does this mean for Europe? President Emmanuel Macron has turned on Israel publicly. What else is he trying to do? So quite a bit to discuss here. Again, the chickens come home to roost. That is the theme. Let's go ahead and get started with the first story, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't done so, smash the like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share like a Care Bear. This first story, ladies and gentlemen, if you are concerned about data, if you are concerned about privacy, this story is going to be especially important for you. And if you live in the United States, because even if you're not concerned about your data and your privacy or whatever, you will be impacted in some way, shape, or form because of the new announcement from Donald Trump. Let's go ahead and get into this here. Donald Trump taps Palantir to compile data on Americans. The gentleman that you see here, Alex Karp, he is the co-founder and the CEO of Palantir. And I'm going to explain how all of this is connected. So everybody get ready for this. In March, Trump signed an executive order calling for the federal government to share data across agencies, raising questions over whether he might compile a master list of personal information on Americans that could give him untold surveillance power. Trump has not publicly talked about the effort since, but behind the scenes, officials have quietly put technological building blocks into place to enable his plan. In particular, they have turned to one company, Palantir, the data analysis and technology firm. So this is not good. This is a big one. And we're talking about your data, whether it's your student loan information, whether it's your social media. A lot of times we say data, people just think we're talking about social media accounts. Yeah, social media accounts, but also your financial information, your student loan information, right? Social security numbers, like anything that can be seen as data. And basically what is happening is that the United States is turning into a surveillance state. Now, Edward Snowden warned all of us about this many years ago, and that happened under President Barack Obama. So now what you're seeing is that both parties approve of an enhanced surveillance state. I also want to point out, it's important to know, don't forget that Palantir also donated to Kamala Harris's campaign. So both of these candidates for 2024 were headed down this path. Let's go on a little bit more here. The Trump administration has expanded Palantir's work across the federal government in recent months. The company has received more than $113 million in federal government spending since Mr. Trump took office. That's according to public records, including additional funds from existing contracts, as well as new contracts with the Department of Homeland Security and the Pentagon. So Palantir has contracts with DHS and also the Pentagon. Again, everyone should have a problem with this. Everyone. I don't care who you supported in 2024. Everyone should be against this. This is not going to be a positive for the American people, especially if you value your privacy. And how will Palantir try to take this information and use it? Will it be used against us? Will it be, helpful towards other entities like Israel, for example? What is this all about? Representatives of Palantir are also speaking to at least two other agencies, the Social Security Administration and the IRS, and buying its technology, according to 6 government officials and Palantir employees with knowledge of the discussions. So here we go again. Here's evidence that shows that they're also talking to the Social Security Administration. They're also talking to the IRS. So, like I said, not just your social media, but your financial information as well. Why would they need this information? What exactly are they planning? Anna said, say no to 23andMe. That's another example, another one of those instances that does actually compile your data and your information. The push has put a key Palantir product called Foundry into at least 4 federal agencies, including DHS, HHS, so also Health and Human Services. Wildly adopting Foundry, which organizes and analyzes data, paves the way for Mr. Trump to easily merge information from different agencies, the government officials said. So I bring up this information because it was just almost a year ago, about 9 months ago, when I interviewed Whitney Webb, and I need to bring her back onto the show. She did sound the alarm about this. When this news was first announced, my response on X was, didn't Whitney Webb warn us about the connection between Palantir and Trump and Peter Thiel and JD Vance? If you didn't see that, you'll see it now. Just a reminder of what Whitney Webb said. Again, this was 9 months ago.
Aside from PayPal, one of the things that is most concerning about Peter Thiel is his involvement in Palantir. I mentioned earlier he had connections to Richard Pearl. He used Richard Pearl while he was setting up Palantir to connect him with the person that was running a surveillance program that was at that time being defunded by Congress that was called Total Information Awareness and was supposed to be housed in DARPA. And it was one of these, it was even more invasive into Americans' lives than the Patriot Act even was. And that's why it was defunded and the Patriot Act was not. And essentially what Peter Thiel did was turn Palantir into a completely privatized version of Total Information Awareness, because they correctly gambled that people had complained about the military having this program because it was housed in DARPA, which is part of the Pentagon. But if it was just a private sector venture, people wouldn't complain as much.
So do you see what they're doing? They took something that was a private company and gave it government contracts. So Palantir now has these contracts with DHS, Homeland Security. Also, they're looking at the Social Security Administration, the IRS, and the Pentagon. You see how they're sneaky? So instead of using the military, they decided to use a private company so people wouldn't think too much about it. Let's go on.
They were completely accurate about that. And so Peter Thiel not only privatized that failed DARPA program as Palantir, he also privatized another DARPA program that was shut down, but part of the same circle of surveillance, projects and proposed projects, and turned that into what is now Facebook. So Facebook existed before Peter Thiel got involved, but the person that provided the capital that put them on a map and actually gave them, enabled them to rise the way they have was Peter Thiel, who was on the board for decades and essentially directed a lot of their product development and what they would become. And I wrote an entire article about the similarities and development of Facebook to be a resurrection of the same DARPA surveillance program, where we freely give away our faces and everything we do in our lives, our events, where we are, our location, posting it for other people to see, but also for the government to harvest that data, which was the intention of that original DARPA program. And Palantir, more specifically, what it does is that it analyzes all of the data mined off the internet about you. So everything, for example, the NSA would suck up about your activity. Palantir turns all, this massive swath of otherwise unusable data, because it's just so much, and then turns that into actionable intelligence, turns it.
Everybody hearing this? Everyone pay close attention to this. So here we go again. what did Edward Snowden warn us all about, right? And I'm surprised even back then more people weren't alarmed about the information that Edward Snowden, revealed. Again, this is how I became to know of journalist Glenn Greenwald, was the Edward Snowden story. I'm still surprised that more Americans weren't outraged that here we had Obama's presidency, and they were using like the Patriot Act. They were using the NSA to actually spy on Americans, to invade your privacy. And so we don't even have a right to privacy in this country. We're supposed to, but we really don't. And more people were focused on the fact of, don't you point your finger at Barack Obama. Don't you sit up there and get mad at him. He's a black president. People were more upset with Edward Snowden for letting you know what was going on than they were at the government for spying on the American people. People were more upset with the messenger. That's how lost people were.
Into something that intelligence agencies can interpret. And one of the things it does is that it labels Americans subversive based on their online activity. And this is very bad because the same group that made Total Information Awareness created this database during the Reagan administration that became part of the Iran-Contra scandal. And unfortunately, that database still exists. And so any American deemed subversive enough is put on this list. And as of 2008, there were 3 million Americans on it. And because of these protocols that were created in this Reagan era called the continuity of government protocols, if there's a vaguely defined national emergency deemed by the government to be severe enough, the people on this list can be detained or put under house arrest or whatever without any trial, just sort of have their constitutional rights suspended.
No due process. Now, she said at that point, I think she said it was like 3 million Americans that were on that list at that point in time. You see, this is a way for them to get around that. No right to trial by jury, even though most people don't actually have a trial by jury. Most people end up pleading out. No due process at all. They can just put restrictions on you. This is all through Palantir, Peter Thiel, JD Vance, Donald Trump. And again, for those just joining, I want to remind you, Palantir also was donating to Kamala Harris's campaign. Both parties are supporting more surveillance on the American people. And you can bet they're not going to use that surveillance to look out for people like, let's try to spy on people that have a history of, I don't know, like, maybe they were connected to a serial killer, or maybe we think this person is a serial killer. Like, no, they're going to use it, I think, to go after activists, people who might be critical against Israel, probably to do more deportations, like who knows, but people who are really advocating against like the type of power that they are trying to hold on to and continue to consume.
So Palantir is the group that decides whether or not you're on that list. And they're a contractor for all 18 U.S. intelligence agencies and also for our health system. They sucked up all the COVID data for both the United States and the United Kingdom, and are training their AI on that, and are basically, I would argue, trying to position themselves as building the an AI system to serve as essentially a global brain, because they run all the data for U.S. intelligence. They run all the data for the public healthcare system in the U.S. and the United Kingdom, or at least public health data, and major policies made by the CDC and HHS. And they also run Wall Street. A lot of major Wall Street banks and hedge funds and all of that use Palantir's AI to predict things before they happen, so they can make trades and things like that.
In other words, making sure that they protect corporate interests and enriching the elites, right? So Palantir is a double threat because both parties supported or took donations from Palantir in 2024. And then also, Palantir is not just connected to the federal government, to these intel agencies, but also to the healthcare system and Wall Street. All these entities of power, Palantir is connected to all of that. Wait till you find out what else Palantir did.
So, this is a hugely influential company with arguably too much power. And it's pretty much a clear CIA front company, I would argue. I would say that because the first people to fund Palantir, besides Thiel, who gave some of his own money to it, was the CIA's venture capital firm InQtel. And for the first like 5 or 6 years as a company, their only client was the CIA. Palantir CEO Alex Karp says the CIA was always the intended client of Palantir. And I think in just a 3-year period, early on in the company, the top engineers at Palantir visited CIA headquarters in Virginia over 200 times. Tweaking having the CIA tweaking to help them develop their product. So that's a very, very extensive relationship with the CIA. And to claim that, someone like Peter Thiel is a libertarian, that would, presumably libertarians are about like limiting big government and the excesses of big government. And this is a guy that gave literally the most out of control surveillance tool to the most out of control intelligence agency in the United States and arguably the world. So, this is not a guy that I think is good at all. The fact that his, a guy that he essentially created is Trump's vice presidential candidate, I think should be really concerning. For those reasons alone, but also, Thiel, back when Trump was in office the first time, was also a big part of Trump's transition team, picked major aspects, or helped make major appointments on who was brought in at the Trump Pentagon, for example. And with J.D. Vance as the VP, arguably his influence will be even greater than it was last time around, without Thiel even having to be openly donating to the Trump campaign. And
Everybody hear that? So Whitney made that statement 9 months ago. And she was giving the warning about this relationship between Palantir, Peter Thiel, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance. Peter Thiel created J.D. Vance. So all of this was connected. So again, what they do, and this is the important part to remember, what they do is they spout this America First narrative because that works, right? It'll help you win an election. Donald Trump isn't stupid. Donald Trump knows that populism actually works. You see what I mean? Like he did this when he ran in 2016, drain the swamp, right? Help the working class. He said to white working class people, I see you, right? He knows that populism works. And I wonder if everybody realizes this, that the people who voted for Donald Trump, I wonder if they realize that while at the same time Donald Trump was criticizing Bernie Sanders' campaign and say his socialism is communist and all this type of stuff, he was also running a populist campaign. So you were still voting for populism, but that's not what you received. And here we go again this time around. Donald Trump, Peter Thiel, and their whole circle there, what they did is that they ran on we got to protect America first. We got to look out for Americans first, because that works. That will actually help you win. Like, yeah, let's look after our interests here in the United States. Let's help the American people first. We need to concentrate on fixing things here, like the economy and the wages and all those types of things. But they don't actually intend to do that. So they win by going by a populist message, but at the same time, they are actively working along with these entities that are there to suppress your freedom of speech, control your movements, and surveil you. So they're taking away your freedoms. They're not giving you more. Here's the CEO here of Palantir. I want to tell you what else Palantir did. Donald Trump just gave your data to this guy. I want to show you what he said. Palantir CEO gets called out for enabling a genocide. Did you guys know that Palantir technology is used in Gaza? Everybody connecting the dots? So you see how it was basically make Israel great instead of make America great? Aha! Listen to this.
Few people get wealthy.
Getting wealthy off of killing Palestinians with Palantir kills Palestinians with their AI and technology.
Oh.
They're killing my family in Palestine.
Yeah. And
What kind of person are you? How do you sleep at night?
Well, if you,
Shame on you.
so the primary source of death in Palestine is the fact that Hamas has realized that there are millions and millions of useful idiots that will.
Using that excuse, this is why you don't get left to speak. Because you are killing my people and you're justifying it because of Hamas or anyone else.
Can we get security up there?
Okay. One of the most.
How dare you?
Okay.
How dare you? Your AI and your technology from
Mostly terrorists. That's true.
No, it's not everybody. If you say mostly, so it's okay to kill.
Okay.
innocent others.
Look, if your argument was so strong, wouldn't you let me talk? It's so strong. It's so strong. It's so strong. Your argument is okay. That's. Thank you for.
Anyone else who supports this technology and AI to kill Palestinians.
So there's a connection there. It all leads back to Israel. And I know sometimes people are like, but Sabs, everything isn't because of Israel. I get that. But this is a, direct connection here. This is what Donald Trump just tapped on the back to give more access, obviously, to the U.S. government, contracts with the U.S. government to basically invade our privacy. Everyone should have a problem with that. And then this part here as well, exactly as predicted. Now that Doge has scraped all your personal data from government agencies, it is being given to Peter Thiel's Palantir. It was always going to be Peter, who dreamed of dictatorship for decades, patiently built up his political project to seize power. And so this is what is going on, folks. So Elon Musk is connected to all of this as well, as I'll also show you. While Elon Musk started this Doge thing to convince the American people, we're going to cut back waste and you're going to get the money back that you deserve to get back. But no, this was really just about firing people. People lost federal jobs. Also, to add on to this, you can add that now you see the security part. Now you see the surveillance part. So when Elon Musk went in there to gather all of that data, he sent that information right over to Palantir so that they can have a hyper surveillance state of the United States. Go and watch the movie if you haven't seen it, Minority Report, because I feel like that's where we're headed. They want to watch us. They don't trust us. It's like having micromanagement. Anybody ever had a boss that was a micromanager? Isn't that annoying? You have that one boss that kind of looks over your shoulder to watch you type in emails and all that stuff. It's very annoying. The reason why they do that is because they don't trust you. They micromanage you because they don't trust that you can do your job. They are trying to increase surveillance on us here in the United States because they don't trust the American people. How is that making Americans first? How is that helping out America? It's not. And more people got to push back on this. More people got to push back on Donald Trump for this, whether you supported him or not. But definitely, if you voted for Donald Trump, you need to push back on this. I don't approve of this. I didn't approve of the surveillance under Barack Obama. I don't approve of it under Donald Trump, period. You look at what's happening right now to Glenn Greenwald. We have no privacy, no privacy. And you see the connection here with Elon. Peter Thiel's deep ties to Trump's top ranks. The tech magnate has many links to new Trump administration and the cost slashing effort led by Elon Musk. You can see this here. Billionaire tech entrepreneur who used his wealth and influence in Silicon Valley to help Donald Trump win the presidency has deep connections to the new administration efforts to remake the government. His name is Peter Thiel. While Elon Musk and a crew of longtime employees of young acolytes have been fanning across Washington under the banner of Doge, more than a dozen people with ties to Thiel, including current and former employees of his companies, as well as people who have helped manage his fortune and benefited from his investments in charitable giving, have been folded into the Trump administration. All of these people are connected and they're billionaires. So what do we tell you before? That billionaires flock together? People tend to roll together with their wealth group. That's typically how this works. Musk and Thiel have been intertwined since the early days of PayPal, which Thiel helped found and where Musk briefly served as CEO. People forget that Elon Musk was once a part of PayPal. Since then, Musk, who leads Tesla and SpaceX and other companies, has become the world's richest person, while Thiel has built a multifaceted empire ranging from software firm Palantir Technologies to investment offices with stakes in top Silicon Valley startups. So this goes back to, again, when Donald Trump was running and he was having all these meetings with these tech bros. And by the way, this is the problem. Like the Democrats can't really say too much about this either because they also have relationships with these tech bros. Ro Khanna has relationships with David Sacks, the same David Sacks who said we're going to support Donald Trump. All these people are connected. They're in a club that we're not in. And they're working against us. They're not working for us. They're working against us. They don't trust the American people. All of it leads back to the tech industry, the tech bros, Silicon Valley, and they want to get their hands in these government contracts and they want to spy on us. That's where all the money goes. People don't donate money to these campaigns just to be nice. David Sachs doesn't donate just to be nice. Elon Musk doesn't donate just to be nice. Peter Thiel doesn't donate just to be nice. Now you have the very person that Peter Thiel created, J.D. Vance, who's vice president of the United States, who's probably, if Trump doesn't do this third term thing he's talking about, who's probably going to run in 2028. They're all bought. But it was in plain sight. It was right in front of us. We may not have noticed, but here's an example. Shout out to Indie News Network. Anybody remember this from the Army-Navy game? December 14th, 2024. Look at the picture. Look at the picture. There's Mike Johnson, Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk. But what's even more important is what is to the right of them. USAA and, oh my God, Palantir. Those are the sponsors, guys. Why is Palantir a sponsor at an Army-Navy game? It makes sense that USAA would be there because they're, like the military, like employees and stuff, USAA, they have like a bank and all that kind of stuff. That's who they serve. Why is Palantir there? Why is Palantir a sponsor at the Army-Navy game? It was right there in plain sight, right in front of all of us. They were laughing in our faces. We are becoming more of an, increasingly surveillance state. And if you were against this under Obama, you damn sure need to be against it under Donald Trump. The chickens come home to roost. It's all coming out in the open now. What's done in the dark is now coming out in the light. And I'm pretty sure if I were to ask people who voted for Donald Trump, I'm pretty sure most of them will probably tell me they do not co-sign this. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Shout out to Roger. Thank you for the super chat. Always a member, just had to rejoin. Membership lagged. Oh, thanks, Roger. I didn't know that. FM says, LBJ, blacks will vote for us Democrats for the next 60 years. We'll get there, FM. We'll get there. Nico says, Peter Thiel has always been on my sus radar years ago. Jack says, what do you think the Doge asset stripping grift was about? Melee, Zio vultures, feeding. Fine Weather says, but Sabby, Snowden wasn't an official source. LOL. I know, right? Isn't that what they said? Terry Hinton says, Thiel has investments in SpaceX. They're all connected. Thank you, Old Crow. Also, when they use private companies, you can't FOIA the information. Our national security is gone Palantir, and Foundry is found on all levels of defense networks. Scary times, folks. Buckle up. Let's get the comment on Rockfin. All right. Thank you, Roger. Here's 1 minute clip regarding Palantir and HR 1 big, beautiful bill that I was telling you about on Zoom last week, Sabrina. Feel free to play it. It's very informative. It's only a little over a minute long. If you can play it, cool. But if not, no worries. I don't think we can copy and paste from Rockfin over into Stream. And thank you for this one. Whether you play it or not, please put the link in so people can see it, and make sure that you send the link to all these MAGAs out here, like Gunther Eagleman and other funny looking Larry the Cable Guy people out there here to pronounce America as America. Who are you rallying for Republicans to codify Doge cuts into law? Good points there. Crazy stuff, guys. All right, we're heading into the next story. I have some good news. Things are starting to shift, right? We say the chickens come home to roost, and with this story, I think you'll see why as well. Believe it or not, over the weekend, President Emmanuel Macron basically turned on Israel. And the question is going to be whether or not Macron's statement and his actions, which we'll get into the action that he's trying to do, whether or not that will be enough to convince other European leaders to follow his lead. Check it out, fam. Not kidding. Look, Macron says Israel can't have a free pass in Gaza. A series of exchanges marked a new low point in the relationship between France and Israel, which accused the French president of a crusade against the Jewish state. So you see what's happening now? More people starting to turn. And it's interesting. It's funny, too, because I know we've been picking on Macron for quite some time. I think starting with the protest a year or two ago in France, where people were protesting saying, no, you're not going to increase our retirement age, that type of thing. And then, of course, his wife punching him and all that kind of stuff. So we've been picking on Macron for quite some time, but this is a good thing that he's doing here. Let's go ahead below. A war of words between France and Israel escalated on Friday as President Emmanuel Macron, in a speech opening a security forum in Singapore, said the West risked losing all credibility with the rest of the world if Israel was allowed a free pass in Gaza. Earlier in the day, during a meeting with reporters, Macron threatened to harden the collective position of the European Union against Israel. This is important. We will highlight this. Geez Louise. He threatened to harden the collective position of the EU against Israel if there is not a response to the humanitarian situation in the next few hours. How exactly European states would do that was not clear. So this is Macron speaking on behalf of the entire EU. Now, I don't know how other European countries, if they would agree with him, how they feel about that. We do know that Spain has been very vocal recently, but he is speaking on behalf of the entire EU here. Israel's foreign ministry shot back in a statement saying the government was facilitating the entry of humanitarian aid. The facts do not interest Macron, it said. Now go ahead and interject here. I can't show those videos here because it shows like something violent, but recent videos as of even this morning showed aid trucks coming in, and it showed children and women going to the aid trucks and Israel opening fire on them as they approach the aid trucks. They are doing a cat and mouse game with the Palestinian people, whereas like they're taunting them with the food. But the moment that they try to go get the food, they start to open fire on them. That is what is happening in Gaza. This isn't the first time. They also did this during Biden's administration as well. We were calling it out then, and we call it out now. So if I saw those videos, I'm pretty sure he saw those videos too. I'm pretty sure a lot of world leaders saw those videos. It's absolutely disgusting. Relations between France and Israel have plunged to their lowest point in years. Israel has been infuriated by Mr. Macron's apparent plan, alluded to again in Singapore, to recognize a Palestinian state, while France and other European powers, including Britain, have run out of patience with Israel's sustained assault in Gaza. Macron is on a mission to want to announce a Palestinian state. Now, this is a big deal because typically the countries in Europe, again, they're aligned with the United States, they're part of the West, and they support Israel and have for as long as I can remember. But now things are starting to change. And now you could ask yourself, is part of this a political move for Macron? Because under Biden, he did call out like what Israel was doing, but he didn't take it to this extent. And now that Trump is in office, some of these other world leaders seem to be a little bit more vocal. Some of the other Western allies are a little bit more vocal, or their words are a little bit harsher than they were before. So don't forget that, Macron is typical like neoliberal. He's backed by people like Barack Obama. So it could be a political move for him, not necessarily sure, but he said what needed to be said. It goes on to say here, Mr. Macron's statements after a series of recent French warnings seen as provocations in Jerusalem ignited the fury of Israel, which accused Mr. Macron of leading a crusade against the Jewish state and wanting to reward terrorists with a Palestinian state. No doubt its national day will be October 7th. So you guys see what's happening here, right? Israel, what they are doing is they are basically saying that if you criticize them, you're criticizing a Jewish state, and you're rewarding terrorists if you want them to be humane to the Palestinian people. So once again, this just shows that Israel sees them all as Hamas, including the babies. Like we've seen this in their rhetoric before. Now, I want to show you Macron making that statement here. And this is at the Shangri-La dialogue.
If we abandon Gaza, if we consider there is a free path for Israel, even if we do condemn the terrorist attacks, we kill our own credibility in the rest of the world. And this is why we do reject double standards, and this is why I think it's very important in our current environment to be consistent and to follow our principles, our rules, and to consider that what is at stake is clearly the global order, and what is at stake is our credibility to protect this global order. If we abandon Gaza, if we consider there is a free path for Israel, even if we do condemn the terrorist attacks, we kill our own credibility.
So that part right there, that you kill your own credibility if you abandon Gaza. And I think the word that he used there, that it's a strong word, abandon, right? Because he knows, and the other leaders know this too. Everybody knows what Israel is doing. The world leaders aren't stupid. They're not naive. Stop saying that. They know what Israel is doing. So he used the word abandon Gaza. And that's actually what's been happening. They have been abandoned because other people have either turned a blind eye or they've kind of gone along with the process. This part.
In the rest of the world. And this is why we do reject double standards, and this is why I think it's very important in our current environment to be consistent and to follow our principles, our rules, and to consider that what is at stake is clearly the global order, and what is at stake is our credibility to protect this global order.
So credibility to protect that global order and to be consistent. But he's not really consistent. He's consistent in this sense because now he's calling out, what's happening in Gaza, and he's saying, like, this isn't right. This is a humanitarian issue. But he has no problem, implementing colonialism and imperialism against African countries. So it's interesting. He's talking about being consistent, but he's also not consistent. Think about that for a second. And that's why part of me wonder, maybe it's political, maybe it is, but this isn't good for Israel either way. This is a Western ally that is speaking out against them vocally. And that brings me to this part. Here's another one. Macron navigates rocky path to recognizing a Palestinian state. Here's another thing. I don't know if everybody knew that he was moving in this direction. Emmanuel Macron is leaning towards recognizing a Palestinian state, but diplomats and experts say such a move may prove a premature and ineffective way to pressure Israel into moving towards a peace deal with the Palestinians. So let me just say something here about pressure, okay? I feel like this idea of pressuring Israel is just as ridiculous as trying to pressure politicians from within the Democratic Party. I don't think it works. Israel is very clear about what they want and what they want to do. It is a Zionist project. They signed up for this many years ago. It was going to happen at some point that they were going to move in this direction. With or without October 7th, they started removing people from their land. Let's be very clear. So I think it's mute, this whole pressure Israel. No. There is no pressure Israel. The way that you stop all of this is you stop doing business with Israel if you're doing it. You implement sanctions on Israel. You let Israel's economy crumble. That's how you fight back against what Israel is doing. There's no pressure Israel, because any type of so-called pressure that's been put on Israel, they ignore it anyway, and they continue to kill innocent people. Just got to put that out there. They say it could deepen Western splits, not only within the already divided European Union, but also with the United States, Israel's staunchest ally, and would need to be accompanied by other measures such as sanctions and trade bans if recognition were to be anything more than a symbolic gesture. French officials are weighing up the move ahead of a United Nations conference. This is coming up June 17th through the 20th. This is going to be with France and Saudi Arabia. They are co-hosting this conference to lay out the parameters for a roadmap to a Palestinian state while ensuring Israel's security. So this is interesting. It looks like, once again, Saudi Arabia is in the mix here. Only a political solution will make it possible to restore peace and build for the long term, Macron said on Wednesday with his visit to Indonesia. Together with Saudi Arabia, we will soon begin organizing a conference on Gaza in New York to give fresh impetus to the recognition of a Palestinian state and the recognition of the state of Israel and its right to live in peace and security in this region. This is very interesting. And as I said before, even if a Palestinian state is established, which I don't think it will be, I think that that time came and went, that doesn't stop Israel from attacking Palestinian people. They'll still do it because they know there's no accountability. That's the other thing, right? But this is a big story right now that Macron is pretty vocal about being tired of what Israel's doing. And it looks like trying to work along with Saudi Arabia in some way, shape, or form to move things in a different direction. We'll have to wait and see if that really happens. But ladies and gentlemen, the chickens come home to roost. Anytime you have the Western countries that were allies of Israel now publicly speaking out against what they are doing and looking to move in a different direction, that is not good for Israel. It's also not good for the United States. France is also, of course, an ally with the United States government. So how does it look when you have a Western ally like France trying to work alongside Saudi Arabia to come up with their own pathway to help the Palestinian people, and the United States is left out of it? Ladies and gentlemen, we are moving closer and closer towards a multipolar world, which I support. But what we're also starting to see is that some of these Western allies of the United States are also tired of the US's BS, and they're tired of Israel's BS, and they're more open to doing things differently. It was just over a year ago in an interview with CNN where President Macron said that he thinks that France, or that Europe in particular, should also try to become a third, power, that they shouldn't be dependent on the United States. So I think BRICS in itself really started something, because now it's making leaders of other countries start to think, you know what, maybe we shouldn't follow their beck and call either. Maybe we should start to look out for ourselves as well. Chickens come home to roost. Israel is being called out by the West more so, and I think we all need to pay attention to how this is going to move. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Crazy One Mama, who's been a member for 4 months. Check out Palantir OS Immigration. Scary stuff. Thank you, Andrea. Americans need to stand on the side of America, not the political parties. We are too soft as a nation. The time for nice is over with public servants. I agree with you, Andrea. I agree with you. The parties are going to be, you guys know that the founding fathers didn't want political parties because they knew something like this would happen, that people, instead of, fighting for the issues, they would just go into said party and just go along with what the party wants. T said, Singapore is like 20% Muslim, isn't it? I'm not sure the exact percentage, but I do know that there is a Muslim population there. Thank you, Marlon. Disarming Israel is the only way to save at least some of the Palestinian population. That part too, stop giving them the weapons. And thank you, Roger. You call it multipolar world. I call it a cooperative world. Hey, I like that too. All right, base. Let's get the comment on Rumble. Thank you, Goo. Unfortunately, China is the #1 trading partner of Israel, with the US at a distant #2. China should halt trade, and that would be a huge blow. Yes, they should. You're right. You are right. We're going to get to something a little bit more funny this Sunday. I got to have something that'll make you laugh, because this shit was funny. If you haven't done so, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you very much. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Appreciate you, fam. Let's get ready to laugh, shall we? Okay. Every now and then, people who have a little bit more wealth and resources decide to make a decision whether or not they want to fight or they want to flee. Currently, commentator David Pakman has made a decision, or looks like he's leaning towards fleeing the United States. Now, before you start laughing, I'm not joking. I'm dead serious. David Pakman, Democrat pundit. At one point, he used to lean a little bit more progressive. Guess he realized there was more money to become, more of an establishment Democrat and just back those people. And there is more money to do that. I guess he decided that he doesn't want to really stay here and fight. And this is the thing I said before about class. Like, yes, there are people who are class traitors, but there aren't a lot of them. And oftentimes when people are in a fight, and, people are in a fight for their homes, wages, their health. People are in a fight for their lives and have been for years. But even more so now, people who have the money and resources to exit can easily do so. So I want you to think about that when you hear this spiel here from David Pakman, that people who are poor, people who are working class, they can't just pick up and leave the United States like that. Let's get into it. Don't laugh too hard. Dead serious.
I need to talk to you about something that I know is going to trigger strong reactions from people in my audience. My only request is that you hear me out first, okay? The title of this segment is I'm Preparing to Leave the Country. And before you start typing angry comments about how I'm abandoning the United States or whatever, I want to be crystal clear. I am not actively planning to leave the United States at this moment. I'm not packing bags. I haven't bought a one-way ticket anywhere for my family. What I'm doing is I'm preparing to leave the country should the need arise.
Okay, guys, ladies and gentlemen. That's like somebody like, yeah, I'm not really buying a car. I'm looking at cars, but I'm not buying a car. I'm not trying to buy a house. I'm looking at houses, but I'm not trying to buy a house, but I'm just looking, just in case. You're considering doing it. He's considering leaving the United States. So it's like you say that you're not trying to abandon. No, you are trying to abandon. He's trying to run. You see, times have gotten too tough for David, and David is ready to grab his book bag and get the hell up out of here. And he can do that because he has the money and the resources to do it. People who are poor, people who are working class that are still struggling, can't afford to pay for their prescription medication, can't afford to see the doctor, can't afford to keep the lights on, can't afford to pay for rent, are being gentrified out of their neighborhoods. They don't have the money and the resources that David Pakman has to pick up their stuff and go. Wealthy people do, and David is pretty wealthy. David Pakman's been doing this for a long time. I remember when he was still here in Massachusetts, when it was just a radio show at one point. So David got his money. This guy been all up in the White House, okay? You don't just get invited to the White House just because, right? There's a lot of YouTube commentators. The majority are not invited to the White House. He was up in the White House. He was sitting up there cozy and smosing with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. He got to shake Biden's hand. You don't get that invitation unless you're doing the bidding of said people. So David got his check and David said, times are tough. I'm about ready to bounce. Bye, Felicia. Bye.
And as I've said to people when they call in, if we all leave, we lose the fight by default. But I will never tell someone, don't do what's best for your family. And so this is a form of prepping in a way. It's contingency planning. So let me kind of walk you through what I've been doing over the last few months as the ire of MAGA Trumpism has pushed closer and closer to people that are generally in my situation. Adversarial and antagonistic content creators, naturalized American citizens, another group of which I am a member. And let's have a rational conversation about preparedness. So number one,
you are not a threat. David Pakman is not a threat to the establishment. He supports the establishment. He supports corporate-backed, Wall Street-funded, pro-military industrial complex candidates. He didn't always, but like I said, he realized there was a lot more money on that side of the lane instead of supporting the progressive like options, right? Which is what I remember him doing years ago. If you were a threat, you're not in the White House. If you were a threat, you're not invited to go sit down with Biden and Kamala. You were invited because you're not a threat. Think about it, folks. He's an establishment. He supports the establishment to the T. You don't see David Pakman out there saying, rah, rah, I'm an activist. You don't see David Pakman in the streets. You don't see David at protest. And by the way, after October 7th and in continuance, David Pakman has continued to defend what Israel is doing. So you're not even a threat on that front, fam. Don't get it twisted. He is definitely more pro-Israel. Not a threat.
I have been exploring what would it take to move to Canada. Canada is a difficult place to move to. I'm not doing the whole I'm moving to Canada thing. It's also difficult to move to Canada, but I want to understand the process. What are the requirements? What is the timeline? What is the framework under which I would potentially qualify to move to Canada? It's a very complicated process, but I want to be informed. Secondly, I have been reviewing options in Argentina. Now, I already hold citizenship in Argentina. I'm from Argentina. Argentina has its fair share of problems there, right? It's not like you move to Argentina and all of a sudden your problems are gone. There are serious problems in Argentina, economic and also political. This is not about fleeing. It's, okay, if I want to go back there, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my family?
That's about the third time he said it's not about fleeing, which probably lets you know it is about fleeing. Things are too crazy here. I'm out. He's going to wants to join the likes of like Rosie O'Donnell, like again, the wealthy people who are able to pick up their stuff and get the hell out.
Third, I have, at the advice of people in my audience, I have engaged with a law firm that would help me were I to have a problem re-entering the United States. I have found a law firm that essentially will be on standby when you re-enter the country, no matter your status. I'm a naturalized citizen. Should I have a problem, there would be someone that says, we will be available within X period of time, and should you have any issue getting back into the country, I want to make sure I understand my rights as a naturalized citizen when it comes to re-entry. And fourth,
stop, because here's the thing. So he said that he's a target because he's antagonistic. And I told you David Pakman's not a threat, right? He's not a threat. That right there proves my point. He's looking at what he would need to do to re-enter the country. If he was a serious threat, he wouldn't look to re-enter. If he considered that he was this much of a threat, and oh my God, they're coming after me, he wouldn't look to re-enter the country. He knows he's not a threat, and that's why he's looking to find a way to re-enter. So what he's probably planning to do, let me get the hell up out of here because things are too crazy and I don't want to fight, because I don't really want to fight. So let me get out of here. But when Trump's gone and the Democrats are back in power, then I'll come back. That's why he wants to look to re-enter the United States. Anybody buying this?
This is not like passport bro stuff. I've consulted with a specialist about European countries where you can get permanent residency. This is not because I'm planning to become a European resident. It's because I want to understand what are the options and how does it work. Now, you might say, David, why are you spending time and money if you're not planning to leave? And the answer is the same reason people have emergency funds in a bank account, even if they're not planning to lose their job. It's the
Nah, man, it doesn't work like that. Again, you have the finances. He has the resources to be able to do that, to be able even to consider it. That's the point that I'm trying to mention. He has dual citizenship. He said so himself. So he has citizenship in Argentina. And I know there's issues, economic issues happening in Argentina. But the point is, you're looking into it because you're thinking about doing it. And yes, you do have to spend money to do these things. It costs money to get a lawyer, right? So you're just spending money like that because he can afford to do it. This just cracked me up. And even the thumbnail for this, which I'll show you after, the thumbnail was hilarious.
same reason people have insurance, even though they're not planning to have a car accident. It's the same reason people have fire extinguishers, even though they don't plan to set any house fires. Things are really uncertain right now. And we've seen how quickly things can change. We've seen
a fire extinguisher doesn't cost anywhere near as much as a lawyer. And there are many, apartments and homes that automatically come with the fire extinguisher. I don't think that's a great comparison.
Journalists and political commentators in other countries face persecution. We've seen civil liberties eroded in places where people thought it wouldn't happen. So am I saying I will need any of this? No. Am I saying it's likely? No, not yet. No, I'm not saying it's likely. I'm saying I've determined circumstances are such that I want to know all of my options. Now, I want to be clear about what this is not. This is not a scheme to avoid paying taxes. I know there are people who say, oh, you can move to Cyprus, and then this is not about that at all. I'm not looking for tax havens. In fact, it's very difficult to renounce American citizenship. It's not something I'm even thinking of. And if you don't, even if you move to another country, you still have tax responsibilities here in the United States. So this is not about shirking any financial obligation. This is not about lifestyle preference. It's not the passport bro stuff, as I mentioned, or,
Why does he keep mentioning passport bro? Because David Pakman has a family. Like, why is he mentioning passport bro? Why is he mentioning that? Interesting.
expat fire or any of these movements. This is purely, I want to understand my options in case circumstances change in ways that make staying here untenable for someone in my position. I still believe as of this moment, right, end of May 2025, I still believe as of this moment that the most likely scenario is I will never need any of this information. I'll continue living and working in the United States, paying my taxes, contributing to civic discourse, calling the United States home. But
so that right there lets you know again that he's not a threat. He is not one of these commentators that is under attack. You have seen the ones that are, right? It's not like David Pakman is like a Whitney Webb and is like, I'm going to go somewhere else because I'm revealing information that is about very powerful people, right? And I want to protect my family. It's not like he's like a Whitney Webb. It's not like he's like a Glenn Greenwald who uncovered like the Snowden story. He's not a threat. And I look back on it. Sometimes I wonder if he just did this video just to like, oh, let's see how people feel about this. And let me just do this video and see how people feel. You want to run. You want to run, David. You want to. Let me make this very clear. He wants to leave. David wants to pick up his stuff and get out. while the rest of us stay here and fight. And what he's doing with this video is he's trying to test this to see if his audience would be okay with it. I'm not looking, but I'm looking. I got a lawyer, paid for a lawyer, but I'm not moving, but I'm looking, and I'm thinking it's probably not going to happen, but I'm looking.
If the last 4 or 5 months have taught us anything, it's that sometimes unlikely scenarios become a reality. When they do, I want to be prepared. That's what this is. And the fact that I feel like I need to justify contingency planning so extensively probably tells you something about the current political climate. And the fact that this is controversial is probably why it makes sense. So have I lost my mind? Let me know. I think I'm being realistic about being responsible in preparation. I want to hear from you. What do you think? Is it reasonable contingency planning, what I'm doing, or am I overthinking things? Or am I suffering from paranoid delusions? Let me know.
You trying to run, mofo. You're trying to run. You want to dip. You want out. Just say that. You want out. Things are a little too shaky for me here. I want to just leave and go somewhere else. And he can do that. I mean, he hosts a YouTube show. He can go live in another country and still host that show. I mean, it's just the reality for the most part, unless he moves to a country that doesn't have like Google or YouTube, right? But for the most part, he can do that. And he just wants to know what the audience, how they feel about that before he were to make that decision. Nobody coming for David. Ain't nobody trying to arrest David. I haven't seen David Pakman name ain't been put on no list. David ain't lose, this job because of what he's talking about. Because like I said, he talks about things from a pro-establishment point of view. He talks about things in a way that keeps the empire in power. Even though people railed him for continuing to defend what Israel was doing, he stayed on the side of power. He stayed on the side of the empire. So David is not in threat. David is not threatened. David is not worrisome. David just wants to get the fuck out. And that's how he should just say it. There have been other journalists, other commentators that said they wanted to leave the US and they wanted to live in another country and they wanted to experience what that was like. That's all David had to say. You didn't have to come with all this, I'm just considering, but I'm not. They might come after me. Oh no. When he has never been a threat to power, sides right along with it. And that's why you don't see them trying to take him down. This is why David Pakman gets such promotion from the algorithm that most people don't get that do YouTube commentary, because he's not a threat to power. Granted, he's been doing this for a long time, but still, he goes along with the establishment. And I said this before, when you go along with what the establishment wants, of course, the algorithm is going to heavily promote you more. So that's that. So bye, Felicia. The chickens come home to roost. Now you're starting to see, and mark my words, ladies and gentlemen, as this administration goes on, you're going to see more of this. It's not just David Pakman. I mean, don't forget Rosie O'Donnell checked out, like other people who have money and resources have checked out. The thing is this, as this time goes on, you're going to start to see the people who really want to stay and fight and the people who want to leave. And typically, the people who have the money and the resources to get the hell up out of here will have no problem just doing just that. There are very few who are wealthy that are class traders. Very few that are willing to stay and fight. Now, I've seen this happen in person myself, where people who came from wealth, they say they want to fight for something in organizing spaces. And the moment things get too hot, the moment things get too hot, they're out. I'm out of here. It's too much for me. I got to go. That's the reality. David wants to go. He just wants to see if you are okay with him leaving. I have to say this point here too, because this is just very. When things happen to said groups in this country, when things happen to said people, especially those of us that don't have the money, we didn't have a choice. We had to fight. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Shush Kimmentine says, Bon voyage, David. Terry Hinton says, bye, Pakman. Rich, David Pakman's net worth is estimated to be around 124 million. Okay, so I knew it was up there. I didn't realize it was that high. Holy shit. That's a lot. Jesus Christ. Thank you, Marlon. His bags are packed already. Courtney says, David Pakman, aka real life Shaggy. Thank you, P. Smith. Ireland is deporting Rosie O'Donnell. I guess she went over there and made them miserable, huh? Anna says, I'm not doing it, but I'm doing it. Eric, good point. Emergency fund. Most people have just enough to make rent funds in the bank account. Yeah. A lot of people don't have that. That's what I'm saying. Thank you, Marlon. He's not running from the government. He's running from the people. Let's get the comment on Rumble. Running from the people. Thank you, Goo. Also, that con man, Erdogan, and Turkey is number 4 trading partner of Israel and try to fool his own people that he supports Palestine while he is looting in Syria. Yeah, he's another one. Let's go to part 2 of Type VNC, Corey. Thank you, Goo. Regarding political parties, political theorist Thomas Locke was against removing the monarchy from power because you have one tyrant easier to combat compared to the tyrant majority representative government. That's interesting. And thank you for this one as well. Oh, hell no, David. Stay away from Canada. I take it Goo is in Canada. I take it. Yeah. All right. Interesting. All right, guys, go ahead and smash the like if you haven't done so. And it is time to jump into a Sabby deep dive. This should be an interesting discussion. The chickens come home to roost. So all of us know that Black voters are a big voting bloc for the Democratic Party, so much to the point that the Democratic Party cannot win without the Black vote. And we've seen this happen just recently in the 2024 presidential election where Kamala Harris did not win because she didn't get the percentage of the Black vote that Biden received, that Obama received, or even Hillary, and even Hillary lost. But I think we need to look a little bit back into history and we need to revisit how it became to be so. And we cannot talk about how Black Americans became that powerful voting bloc for the Democratic Party without discussing LBJ. We're going to talk about who LBJ really was and what he did and how he basically trapped Black voters in the Democratic Party, thus crushing the Black grassroots and why that is problematic. Let's start with when did Black voters actually start doing that? So remember, Black voters originally were Republican voters. Why did Black voters flee the Republican Party in the 1960s? Now, let me go ahead and intercept here because the trolls love to do this and clip things. I am not telling you to join the Republican Party. I'm not a Republican. I'm a registered independent. But I'm showing you a pattern of what happened here. Why? Why did Black voters leave the Republican Party? A lot of this is the Goldwater effect. That is Barry Goldwater. So let's go ahead and get into how he helped make this happen. Vincent Hutchings, a political scientist who studies voting patterns at the University of Michigan, said the first major shift in Black party affiliation away from the Republican Party happened during the Depression. FDR's second administration, led by the New Deal, made the Democrats a beacon for Black Americans deeply affected by the crushing poverty that was plaguing the country. But many Black voters stuck with the party of Lincoln. This part's very important. As much as people tout FDR's New Deal, it is important to remember that that New Deal omitted some people. It is important to remember that FDR's New Deal had exclusionary measures that did not apply to Black Americans and also did not apply to Indigenous Americans. It's important to remember that redlining started under the New Deal. So remember that Black Americans weren't able to move into those suburban neighborhoods and get those homes because they weren't able to get the loans from the bank, and they weren't able to get the loans from the bank because of redlining. So if you lived in a district that was redlined, the banks weren't going to lend to you. So even after the New Deal, the majority of Black Americans did not become voters for the Democratic Party. That happened under LBJ. Let's go back in. The data suggests that even as late as 1960, only about 2/3 of African Americans were identified with the Democratic Party. Now, 2/3 is a pretty big number, but when you compare it to today, that number hovers at about 90%. 90%. So what happened? Barry Goldwater happened. Let's get into this a little bit more. We're going to go down here. This is the part I think a lot of people don't really get into. Goldwater can be seen as the godfather or maybe the midwife of the Tea Party. So this article was written in 2014. So they were talking about the current Tea Party. He wanted the federal government out of state business. He believed the Civil Rights Act was unconstitutional, although he said that once it had been enacted into law, it would be obeyed. But states, he said, should implement the law in their own time. Many white Southerners, especially segregationists, felt reassured by Goldwater's words. Black Americans, says Vince Hutchings, felt anything but. African Americans heard the message that was intended to be heard, which was that Goldwater and the Goldwater wing of the Republican Party were opposed not only to the Civil Rights Act, but the Civil Rights Movement in a large part as well. Barry Goldwater gave a gift to LBJ. And what you're going to see is how LBJ was able to use the phrase that you hear a lot, the lesser of two evils. Even back then, he was able to use the lesser of two evils to get Black Americans not only to vote for the Democratic Party, but also to become a reliable, dedicated voting bloc. There's other things that he did that pulled African Americans over to that. We'll get into all of that. But what I want to point out to you is that Goldwater was also openly racist, but LBJ was also racist. What LBJ did was he made an argument for how he would be the lesser evil, and he did so by obviously passing the Civil Rights Act and the social programs. The reason why I'm pointing this out to you today is because the same thing happens now, where you literally had two candidates that were racist that were running, one in the Republican Party, one in the Democratic Party. And one of them did a little bit of something, we call them crumbs, did a little bit of something that would help the Black community to convince Black Americans to not only vote for him, but to continue voting for the Democratic Party for, as he put it, the next 60 years. I'll have them voting for the Democratic Party for 60 years. So Black Americans were still voting for a racist. As we move on, I want to show you this part here. This is important to see. When LBJ ran in 1964, he ran against Barry Goldwater, right? Look at the map. The U.S. presidential election of 1964. You guys see this? This is how LBJ, listen, many of you, we haven't seen a map like this. Like I don't ever remember seeing a map like this as long as I can remember, right? But LBJ won every state except for Arizona, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina. Now, if you're a millennial like me, I don't remember ever seeing an electoral map like this in my lifetime. But do you see how he was able to get all that? Okay. So if you look at the vote count, you will see here the electoral votes. Lyndon B. Johnson, Barry Goldwater, LBJ received 486 electoral votes, and Barry Goldwater received 52. This is big, mainly partially because he was able to capture the Black vote. And he implemented social programs like Medicare and Medicaid and passage of the Civil Rights Act to make sure that Black voters would stay there. Goldwater was the overt racist, but LBJ was also still a racist. You can see it for yourself. LBJ was a civil rights hero, but also a racist. There's him right there. We'll get into some of the things that LBJ did. Because Democrats, they don't like to talk about this. In Senate cloakrooms and staff meetings, Johnson was practically a connoisseur of the word. Johnson would collaborate his pronunciations by region using the N with some Southern legislators and the other N with others. Discussing civil rights legislation with men like Mississippi Democrat James Eastland, who committed most of his life to defending white supremacy, he would simply call it the N bill. You see, the civil rights bill that a lot of us have applauded over the years from LBJ, he referred to it as the N-word bill. LBJ didn't pass this because he wanted to help Black people or because he liked Black people or he felt that Black people had been wrong. LBJ did this to trap Black people in the Democratic Party and to keep them there. And Black American voters have been there for quite some time since. It goes on to say, in 1957, Johnson would help get the N bill passed, known to most as the Civil Rights Act of 1957. With the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the segregationists would go to their graves knowing the cause they'd given their lives to had been betrayed, Frank Underwood style, by a man they believed to be one of their own. When Caro asked segregationist Georgia Democrat Herman Talmadge how he felt when Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, he said, "We shall overcome." Talmadge said, "Sick." The Civil Rights Act made it possible for Johnson to smash Jim Crow. The Voting Rights Act made the U.S. government accountable to its Black citizens and a true democracy for the first time. Johnson lifted racist immigration restrictions designed to preserve a white majority and, by extension, white supremacy. He forced FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, then more concerned with communists and civil rights activists, to turn his attention to crushing the KKK. Through the Fair Housing Act, never fulfilled its promise to end racial segregation. It was another massive effort to live up to the ideals American founders only half-heartedly believed in, a record surpassed by Abraham Lincoln. Now listen to this. As Johnson is celebrated by no less than 4 living presidents, to dismiss Johnson's racism was mere code switching, a clever ploy from uncompromising racial egalitarian whose idealism was matched only by his political ruthlessness. Johnson was a man of his time and bore those flaws as surely as he sought to lead the country past them. For 2 decades in Congress, he was a reliable member of the Southern Bloc, helping to stonewall civil rights legislation. This is the part, again, the Democratic Party doesn't like to discuss. He was a big part of that. Remember, LBJ was a senator. He was in the House of Representatives. He was in the military before he was president of the United States, and he actively worked to block those pieces of legislation. Listen to this part. As Carl recalls, Johnson spent the late 1940s railing against the hordes of barbaric yellow dwarves in East Asia. Beyond buying into the stereotype that Blacks were afraid of snakes, he'd drive to gas stations with one in his trunk and try to trick Black attendants into opening it. Once Carl writes, the stunt nearly ended with him being bitten with a tire iron. This was LBJ who did this. This is who Democrats applaud. Nor was it the kind of immature flat boy racism that Johnson eventually jettisoned. Even as president, Johnson's interpersonal relationships with Blacks were marred by his prejudice. As longtime Jet correspondent Simon Booker wrote in his memoir, Shocks the Conscience, Early in his presidency, Johnson once lectured Booker after he authored a critical article for Jet magazine, telling Booker he should thank Johnson for all he'd done for Black people. In Flawed Giant, Johnson biographer Robert Dallek writes that Johnson explained his decision to nominate Thurgood Marshall to the Supreme Court rather than a less famous Black judge by saying, when I appoint an N-word to the bench, I want everyone to know he's an N-word. This was from LBJ. Don't tell me there's no racism in the Democratic Party. Another part here, according to Caro, Robert Parker, Johnson's sometime chauffeur, described in his memoir Capitol Hill in black and white a moment when Johnson asked Parker whether he preferred to be referred to by his name rather than boy, N-word, or chief. When Parker said he would, Johnson grew angry and said, as long as you're Black and you're gonna be Black to the day you die, no one's gonna call you by your goddamn name. So no matter what you are called, N-word, you just let it roll off your back like water and you'll make it. Just pretend you're a goddamn piece of furniture. This is how LBJ felt about Black Americans. Now, if I didn't tell you who that came from, many people, if I read those quotes, they probably would just assume, oh, that must have been some Republican. No, that was a Democrat. A Democrat who JFK made his vice president. Now I want you to ask yourself this question. LBJ wasn't secretive about his racism. JFK, who believed in MLK's vision, why would JFK choose someone like that to be his VP? Well, for the same reason that Barack Obama chose someone like Joe Biden to be his. To get those who were white moderates to come along and vote for their package. Because you see, even within the Democratic Party, they're still willing to play along with racism to get the win. Now, something else that I thought was pretty interesting that we'll also have to get into. LBJ, by implementing the social programs, which I agree with Medicare, Medicaid, I agree with those things, but that was small compared to what should have been done. Because even when it comes to Medicare, don't forget there's a co-insurance portion. There's a 20%. Don't forget that what should have been done was healthcare for everyone, not these programs where you have to get to be a certain age to benefit from it. So when we talk about Medicare, obviously you have to be a certain age before you even qualify for Medicare. Now, if you're a strategist and you're a racist, but you're still trying to get the vote, well, then since you don't have universal health care, you're probably thinking that many of the Black people probably won't even live that long to get Medicare. These are things to think about, folks. So LBJ was able to capture the Black vote by implementing those social programs and thus by passing that Civil Rights Act. And to his words, as he said, this will keep them voting Democrat for the next 60 years. But that wasn't what was owed. By doing so, he not only was able to crush the Black grassroots, what you also have to understand is that I believe this was one of the first steps of crushing the civil rights movement and Black liberation. Pulling Black people into the Democratic Party, pulling them off the streets of the protests. And then, of course, after that, killing their leaders, MLK, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, etc. The list goes on. It was to crush the grassroots. It was to crush the Black grassroots from demanding what was actually owed. And what was owed? I want you to see what happened to Seneca Village. I want you to see what you look at today as Central Park. I want you to see what the United States government, what the U.S. did to Black people that lived in Seneca Village. Check this out. Everybody needs to know about this.
They faced there. The village was founded in 1825 when landowners in the area, John and Elizabeth Whitehead, subdivided their land and sold it as 200 lots. Andrew Williams, a 25-year-old African-American shoe shiner, bought the first 3 lots for $125. Also, Epiphany Davis, a store clerk, bought 12 lots for $578 US, and the AME Zion Church purchased another 6 lots. From there, a community was born. From 1825 to 1832, the Whiteheads sold about half of their land parcels to other African Americans, and by the early 1830s, there were no less than 10 homes in the village. There is a couple pieces of evidence that shows that residents had gardens and raised livestock in Seneca Village.
Do you guys see how Black Americans, you see what happened? Do you see how Black Americans were building a community in Seneca Village, were building homes? All of this? Let's see what happened. Again, this is in the 1800s.
And the nearby Hudson River was a likely source of fishing for the community. A nearby spring, known as Tanner's Spring, provided a water source. By the mid-1850s, Seneca Village comprised 50 homes and 3 churches, as well as burial grounds, and a school for African American students. For African Americans, Seneca Village offered the opportunity to live in an autonomous community.
So Seneca Village was, working class neighborhood where Black people in the 1800s, again, this is after, slavery, they went there and they built like their own community. They had their own schools, their own homes, etc., all of that jazz, right? Everybody talks about Black Wall Street, Tulsa, and there were multiple Black Wall Streets, not just Tulsa, Oklahoma. Everybody talks about that, but a lot of people don't know about Seneca Village. These things didn't just happen down south. Every time Black people moved after post-slavery, every time and tried to build their own, it was either stolen or burned to the ground. Wait till you see what happens here.
Far from the densely populated downtown. Despite New York State's abolition of slavery in 1827, discrimination was still prevalent throughout New York City and severely limited the lives of African Americans. Seneca Village's remote location likely provided a refuge from this climate. It also provided an escape from the unhealthy and crowded conditions of the city and access to more space both inside and outside the home. Compared to other African Americans living in New York, residents of Seneca Village seem to have been more stable and prosperous. By 1855, approximately half of them owned their own homes. With property ownership came other rights not commonly held by African Americans in the city.
Pause right here. Most of them owned their own homes. So as you can see, Black people were starting to build generational wealth, right? Like home ownership, that's building generational wealth. But our government and the supremacy in this country didn't want that to happen. Didn't want that to happen. This is why whenever you hear people say, oh, Black people are lazy, they don't want to work, they never tried to build anything, that is a blatant lie. Now, what you need to ask yourself is, as much as we've learned in our history classes in school, and we're taught about slavery and we're taught about the civil rights movement, why isn't this in the textbooks? Why doesn't the textbooks include information about Seneca Village or the Black Wall Streets, which more people talk about Black Wall Street today, but that is a little bit more recent. Why isn't that information in the history books? Why don't they want you to know how Black Americans were able to build their own communities, started to establish some type of wealth, and it was burned down or it was stolen and they had to keep moving every time? Why isn't that in the history books? They don't want you to know about it.
namely the right to vote. The fact that many residents were property owners contradicts some common misperceptions during the mid-19th century that the people living on the land slated for the park were poor squatters living in shanties. While a few residents lived in shanties and in crowded conditions, most lived in two-story homes. Census records show that residents were employed, with African Americans typically employed as laborers and in service jobs, the main options for them at the time. Records also show that most children who lived in Seneca Village attended school. By the early 1850s, the city began planning for a large municipal park to counter unhealthful urban conditions and provide space for recreation. In 1853, the New York State Legislature enacted a law that set aside 775 acres of land in Manhattan.
This will be what you now know as Central Park. So do you guys see how Black people see how they saw Black people were building something and building wealth, and they said, oh, let's do a planned park. Let's have green space. This still happens today. It's called gentrification. When you see city planners go into urban neighborhoods and say, let's establish some green space, let's make it more walkable and more friendly, that means they ready to kick your ass out. And they sell it with green space. This is what they did. This New York has a debt that is owed to Black people, to Black Americans, to descendants of slavery. That is owed. These people lost all of their wealth in Seneca Village. They lost it. Gone. Displacement. Does that sound familiar? How many times have we talked about this? This happens all over the world, where people are just displaced, moved after they've built something.
From the 59th to the 106th streets, between 5th and 8th Avenues, to create the country's first major landscape public park. The city acquired the land through eminent domain, the law that allows the government to take private land for public use with some compensation paid to the landowner. This was a common practice in the 19th century and had been used to build Manhattan's grid of streets decades earlier. There were roughly 1,600 inhabitants displaced throughout the area. Although landowners were compensated, many argued that their land was undervalued. Ultimately, all residents had to leave by the end of 1857.
All residents had to leave by the end of 1857. And notice what he said about the compensation. It was undervalued. Does that sound familiar? That still happens today. When Black people try to sell a home and they try to get it appraised, the appraisal was always lower if you're a Black family versus if you're a white family. This country has continued to find ways to keep Black people at the bottom. So when I say there are systemic issues, this is one of the things that I'm talking about. This is not about people being lazy. This is not about people getting a handout. And LBJ's response and Democrats' response to what was done to Black Americans in this country is to let's give everybody some Medicaid and some Medicare and all this types of stuff. Okay, I get it. But that went to everyone. And then there were certain requirements that you had to even meet to even get that. Giving people Medicare and Medicaid didn't stop the government from redlining communities, didn't stop the banks from turning you down, from getting a loan to get a home to establish generational wealth. That happened to my people. This is why this class only, let's just focus on class. Fuck that. Because Medicare and Medicaid, this response, this social package that LBJ had was a response to class. And Black people stayed at the bottom. Every time we were displaced. You see how Israel displaces Palestinian people. You see how they have pushed them out and keep pushing them. These things happen here, right here. But they don't want you to talk about it. Don't talk about history. Don't talk about that part of history. That's divisive. LBJ's response was weak, considering what was old. When you look at what was stolen, what was taken. And the Democratic Party has been giving Black people crumbs since then. And so when I say that you should leave the Democratic Party and you should register as an independent, this is part of the reason why I say it. You don't owe them anything. And the liberal simps will continue to say, she's secretly Republican, or she's trying to drive you into the Republican Party. I'm not driving you into any of these two parties. I'm getting you to walk away from the one that has abused and used you and is only giving you crumbs in return, instead of giving you what is owed. That is my response. LBJ was able to crush the Black grassroots. No more civil rights movement. No more demanding what we were owed. MLK was about to ask for reparations, not just equality. And everybody just went into the Democratic Party, and that was the end of that. Killed MLK. Killed Malcolm X. You guys know they killed Fred Hampton. Get the revolutionary leaders out the way. Give them some crumbs. Put them in the Democratic Party. Get them off the street. Stop them from protesting. And that's that. They won't ask for anything else. You even see it right now with whack-ass Ro Khanna. Look at this. I can't believe he even said this shit. The Democratic Party must keep South Carolina as an early primary state. Charleston trafficked 40% of all enslaved Africans. Removing South Carolina is a betrayal of Black history and dumb politics in building a majority coalition to win. So Ro Khanna believes that the betrayal to Black history is removing South Carolina as an early primary state. And my response to Ro Khanna is, no, Ro Khanna. Not implementing reparations is a betrayal of Black history. Making South Carolina the first primary state as a response to slavery is virtue signaling instead of implementing a debt that is owed. Does everybody see the pattern? You see how Ro Khanna and all of them just continuing on what LBJ did? No. Keep South Carolina as an early primary state, because that's disrespect to enslaved Africans, the country. Instead of giving us what's owed. By the way, Ro Khanna is very well versed on this, because when he came onto this show, when I interviewed him a couple years ago, I made it very clear to him that reparations is a debt that's owed and should be done. He's very aware of this. But here you even got people like him trying to sell you these crumbs. Just take an early primary state instead of us giving what's owed to you. This is how LBJ was able to trap Black Americans in the Democratic Party. And I honestly believe if these things didn't happen, let's say he wasn't able to do that, I really do believe that maybe we would have gotten further. I believe that as Black people, we would have come together and said, no, we're going to be independents. We're not going to make ourselves be a part of said party that hasn't done anything for us. So all these Black Americans ended up voting for, which races do I vote for today? Goldwater or LBJ? And in 2024, people were still like, which one do I vote for? We got to pick the lesser of two evils. And nothing has been done. The debt that is owed to Black Americans has not happened. That is a problem. And I continue to speak on that. And there are reparations that have been paid out to Japanese Americans who were the internments at the internment camps and their descendants, by the way. And it was cash reparations. And you never hear a lot of these people who talk about it as being divisive. I don't hear them say anything about that. So my demand to Black Americans who are watching this, leave the Democratic Party, register as an independent. And if people want your vote, they're going to have to do things for the Black community. There is no, I promise to do this after you vote for me. Nah, the thing should have been done prior. That's the fight that I am leading. And I sincerely hope you will be on that journey with me. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you, Marlon. Now, if the truth don't set you free, nothing or no one else can declare your independence. Thank you, Courtney. They know it's racism in the Democratic Party. It's just sad that they still believe that there's a lesser evil of racism out there. Robbie says, bottom line. Bottom line. Black folks had no option for president 1950 through 2024. Instead of voting third option or third party, we settled for Democrats. Thank you, Marlon. Racism was still normalized in that time of LBJ. Thanks, Chris. The LBJ segment was eye-opening. To your point, Dems play along with racism. That's fine. Don't get upset if we no longer want to play along with them. Thanks, Andrea. Why people think government is a good idea, I don't know. Government? I don't know. Thank you, Maygay. I think that's a snap. Man, these emojis have gotten pretty clever over the years. Thank you, Roger. Dwan B says, we don't owe anyone but an ass whooping. And thanks for this, Roger. Clyburn looks like oatmeal. Damn. Thanks, a kid. Salute to Sabby for continuing speaking truth to power and coverage of South Carolina fake Dems and on Israel's genocide. Love and respect to her. Thank you, Chris. Democratic Party supporters are trapped in an abusive relationship. They don't realize that although it's scary to leave, healing, clarity, and purpose will soon follow. Crumbs are for rodents. I like that, Chris. Crumbs are for rodents. Django. Hey, Sabby, will you interview Tariq Nasheed? Some of your views seem to line up and think y'all might have a good convo about reparations. I am willing to talk to pretty much anyone. I don't know how to reach him, but absolutely. Thank you, Marlon. Have you looked into the new money that Congress is voting on now, regulations on digital assets, XRP, and what it will become? I still have to take a look at that, Marlon. Thank you for reminding me, but it doesn't sound good. Thank you, Tuxedo. Takes a lot of bravery to do what you do. Oh, thanks, Tuxedo. Let's go to Rumbo. Rolling with the homies. Thank you, Goo. Look up the history of Africville, Nova Scotia. A Black community of 120 years was destroyed by the city of Halifax in the 1960s and uprooted them only to get an apology in 2010 as it was based on racism. Interesting, Goo. Looks like something else I need to look into. And thank you, Roger. Sab, quote, you're not a threat if you're invited to the White House. You sparked a memory of that time Bush Sr., former CIA director under Ford, invited Eazy-E to the White House in 1991. Same year, record execs got together with the CIA and future investors in private prisons to steer hip-hop away from acts like Public Enemy, X-Clan, KRS, PRT, and Elevate Gangsta Rap, steering the culture towards embracing criminalization. Coincidence? I didn't know Eazy-E went to the White House, but now you know what? You got me thinking here, Roger. And thank you for this one. 2 infamous LBJ quotes. I'll have those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. Also, if you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. He'll give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. Was he stating it as a fact, strategy, or proclamation? It's a good point. And thank you for this one. JFK, Obama were following the Lincoln playback when it came to picking VPs. I mean, Lincoln went over the top by choosing someone of another party. A Dixie crap for that. Yes, I know I said crap and not cracked. Speaking of Goldwater, Sabrina, we got to do a deep dive on the other water I told you about. There is a part 2 that followed what LBJ set in place. Thank you so much for that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more story for you, and let's go ahead and get into it. So it's obvious that some form of intelligence came after Glenn Greenwald over the weekend. I am not going to show the video. I'm not going to show pictures of Glenn Greenwald in the privacy of his own home or wherever he was. I think there's been a lot of that shared on social media, and he made it very clear that he did not give consent for that to be released. And I'm damn sure not going to continue to spread it on here. But I will say this. Anytime people are being surveilled or there is video that is leaked when someone is in the privacy of their own home or someone else's home and they did not consent to release that information, that is a crime. Over the weekend, there was video footage and pictures that was released of Glenn Greenwald in intimate acts. And the first thing I thought when I saw it, first place I saw it was Twitter. The first thing I thought to myself was, I wish I could just give Glenn Greenwald a big hug. Because what happened to him could happen to any one of us. What people do behind closed doors with whoever they're dating, significant other, whatever, and it was 2 consenting adults, that's really none of your business. And I could just only imagine how he may have felt. It's obvious that this was a coordinated effort, attack on Glenn Greenwald. And when I show you these following videos, I think you're going to understand where that attack came from, where I believe it came from. This first video here was Glenn Greenwald with Tucker Carlson. He was calling out Israel and the Mossad. He was discussing that they were spying on American citizens. This video, this interview just happened to, again, happen right before these pictures and the video release of Glenn Greenwald. So I don't think this is a coincidence.
One of the set of files we released described the intelligence relationship that we have with Israel, that the NSA has with Israel. Israel is the #1 recipient of NSA technology and NSA intelligence. We share more with Israel, even more than we do with the Five Eyes partners who develop this technology. We give more to Israel, more intelligence, raw intelligence about Americans as well, and more intelligence know-how. But at the same time, the documents that describe who are our greatest intelligence threats, who are our greatest intelligence adversaries, who spies on us the most, who is capable of spying out the most, #1 on the list is Israel as well. Obviously, the Israelis use, the most dangerous spying programs like Pegasus and others come from Israel, are developed by Israel, are controlled by the Israelis, by which I simply mean to say that Israel uses every weapon at its disposal, including gathering incriminating information about its enemies.
Okay. So there was Glenn Greenwald talking about how Israel has the technology and the capability to obviously spy on Americans. That interview happened. And then next thing we know, there's this video leaked of Glenn Greenwald in intimate acts. And what was also very troubling to me about this is the number of accounts on X who all of a sudden decided that they didn't know that Glenn Greenwald was LGBTQ. I'm like, these accounts got to be bots, or they're paid to do this in some way, shape, or form. Glenn Greenwald's husband passed away. I believe it was 2023, so not long ago. And he did a tribute to his husband when he passed away. So it was weird to me that they were trying to do a gotcha on a journalist. Like, Glenn Greenwald is a great journalist. And this is what they were trying to do. They're trying to attack his character so that you're not focused on his work. It's an old trick, and some people actually fall for it. I don't care who Glenn Greenwald is in a relationship with. That's not significant, especially considering he is criticizing a country that is committing a genocide. That's more important. But for one day, they were able to take your eye off of that and put your attention on Glenn Greenwald and his life and what he chooses to do and who he chooses to be with. The number of people, granted, a lot of people announced they stood by Glenn Greenwald, but some of these accounts that were Jason Whitlock, I'm going to pray for Glenn Greenwald and pray that God takes him out of this lifestyle. Negro, please. Can you just continue sports commentary? I didn't had it. Just go back to sports commentary and stay away from the political stuff, okay? All of a sudden, he tried to act like he was surprised. This is all a part of the act. They were feeding right into it. That is what was really disappointing as well. Now, he also made this statement. Now, keep in mind that this is edited, but I think they could have come after him for this too. Listen to this.
The Israelis are like an apocalyptic cult. They don't recognize moral limits. They don't acknowledge the humanity of Palestinians. They absolutely consider Palestinians to be animals. There's no way you can just do what they've done to Gaza. Bomb every remaining hospital and mosque and school. They're bombing electricity generators for hospitals so that ICU patients on incubators die. They've bombed shelters. They've constantly bombed people in tents. The number of children who are dead, including under 3 years old, is just, as a statistic, is shocking in itself. There's no question the number of people who have died that we hear from Gaza is extremely underestimated because they only count the people who go through the morgue. Huge numbers of people are still lying under that rubble. There's massive rubble everywhere with bodies underneath who don't make it to the morgue. There are other people who die of disease or hunger who aren't counted because they're not actually killed with bombs or bullets, but they're victims of the Israeli action nonetheless. They've stripped the Palestinians in Gaza of all remaining humanity. I mean, they go to bed every night with Israeli bombers over their head, being terrorized every night that that's the last night their children are going to wake up. I don't even know how you get through this and then maintain any semblance of life, especially the million children in Gaza whose childhood is shaped by this. How do you function? How do you become a normal human being? How do you ever feel safe or stable? Or it's inconceivable.
He said the truth. And yeah, Glenn Greenwald is Jewish and they see people like him. And this is what I was trying to tell you guys. Israel, they look at people like Glenn Greenwald and Katie Halper and Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate, and they see them as traitors. So they really try to come after them. I think there was an announcement Katie was just put on some list. You see what I'm saying? So I find it very interesting that after these conversations, this video just comes out of nowhere. And there were people saying, oh, it looks like he may have been doing drugs or something there. I don't give a fuck. He's a grown man. What people tend to do with their body, that is their choice. Now, he also said this with Tucker Carlson.
Was he working with or for any foreign intelligence agencies? There is no way they don't already have that answer. Maybe the answer is no. Maybe he wasn't working with any. It would shock me, but maybe that's their answer. Maybe their answer is he was. Why don't we have those answers? Like, have FBI agents for whatever reason go through those sex tapes for the next 3 years. That's fine. What stops them from releasing that question? That answer now.
For people who may not be as familiar with the details, what leads you to raise that question? Is there evidence that suggests he might have been working with the foreign intel agency?
Well, first of all,
so he's talking about Jeffrey Epstein.
The source of his wealth has always been mysterious. I mean, he wasn't just very rich. He was living the life of a multi-billionaire. He had, $50 million properties in Manhattan and West Palm Beach and
New Mexico.
bought that island, New Mexico, flying around on a 747. This is not just like somebody who's very wealthy. This is somebody with essentially unlimited resources, right? Like Bill Gates type wealth. And his primary benefactors is Les Wexner, who is a multi-billionaire, somebody with whom he worked closely. And I guess the argument or the claim is he was a brilliant strategist for how to save taxes, how to save money on taxes.
He was like a highly competent accountant, basically.
Yeah, like a tax accountant.
Yeah,
that's tax accountant do. They tell you how, like, what strategies to use to save money. So maybe Les Wexner valued him so much that he gave him, I don't know, $3 billion. In general, billionaires don't like to give money away that they don't have to. Maybe Les Wexner is like super generous, like, oh, so grateful to Jeffrey Epstein. Here's like $2 billion. But Les Wexner has all sorts of ties to, like, his main non-money making endeavor in life is supporting Israel and
Supporting Israel. That part right there, you can watch the rest of this, of course, through the Tucker Carlson interview. But again, I find it very suspicious that that video was leaked. I don't even know if all of it was real, but I'll show you Glenn's statement as well after he had this interview with Tucker Carlson. Now, luckily, it seems like Glenn Greenwald is getting a ton of support from independent media, from all different, like everybody. Like I saw Sagar say he stands by him. Cenk Uygur said it. Of course, those of us at RBN, we said we stand by him. Bree did. Like everybody is, regardless if we all are friends or get along or not, everybody I've seen so far has said that they stand by Glenn Greenwald. Now, he released a statement that says about the videos. Last night, videos were released online depicting behavior in my private life. Some were distorted and others were not. They were published without my knowledge or consent, and its publication was therefore criminal. Though we do not yet know exactly who is responsible, we are close to knowing, and the motive was a maliciously political one. And for the content of the videos, I have no embarrassment or regret about them. The videos depict consenting adults engaging in intimate actions in their private lives. They all display fully consensual behavior, harming nobody. Obviously, it can be uncomfortable and unpleasant when your private behavior is made public against your will. That's why the behavior is private in the first place. But the only wrongdoing here is the criminal and malicious publication of the videos in an attempt to malign perceived political enemies and advance a political agenda. Others are, of course, free to form their own judgments, as some are prone to do about others' private lives. It won't change my work. I will continue all the many prongs of my journalism and pursue the cause most important to me exactly as before. So I have to say this as well. Glenn Greenwald is an amazing journalist. Again, let's not forget the work that Glenn Greenwald has done. And I feel like that's exactly what whoever leaked these videos were trying to do. They're trying to get you to focus on that instead of focusing on the work that he has done, right? Glenn Greenwald is one of the few, and I say few, that elevated Black independent media voices like Revolutionary Blackout Network. When other people rejected us and still do till this day, don't want anything to do with us because we're not dim sycophants or whatever. Glenn Greenwald gave us a platform. When Glenn Greenwald started his show System Update on Rumble, he brought on Nick from RBN and myself from RBN onto his show when other white commentators refused to engage with us. That's something that I will always remember. Now, we may agree on some things politically and may not agree on other things politically. But the work, the journalism, which he really does real journalism, that Glenn Greenwald has done, that can't be disputed. Period. And I just hope everybody remembers that. I hope everybody, takes that home with them. And I love the way that Nico put this. And Nico read my mind. He's so good at this. We won't play the whole thing, but just listen to this part.
Breaking news, everybody. 2 consenting adults had sex, and one of them just so happened to be a journalist. Oh my God! Yes, somebody leaked a tape of Glenn Greenwald having consensual intimacy with another adult. And yeah, Glenn released a statement about it, but I think I speak for everybody when I say, we don't need to read all that, because 98.999% of us don't give a flying fuck if Glenn Greenwald has sex.
Right. Exactly. Thank you so much, Nico. Nico does a really great job there, obviously. And so the chickens come home to roost because obviously Glenn Greenwald's getting attacked because, number one, he is Jewish. He is a prominent journalist, a prominent Jewish journalist that is calling out what Israel is doing. And he went onto a very massive platform, which is Tucker Carlson's show, and called out what Israel is doing. And that is why I believe that video was leaked of him. And I really think that's what this is all about. Israel is in panic mode because even some that are on the right are turning against Israel, including people like Thomas Massey. Shout out to Thomas Massey for this. Nothing can justify the number of civilian casualties, tens of thousands of women and children inflicted by Israel and Gaza in the last 2 years. We should end all U.S. military aid to Gaza. Thomas Massey for the win. So does everybody see what's really happening? They're in panic mode because that's what I was trying to tell you guys. Even some conservatives are like, yo, this is not what I signed up for. This is ridiculous. So see how more people are speaking out against it. So at first they could just point fingers at the left and say those radical leftists are pro-Hamas and they're pro-terrorists and they hate Israel and da-da-da-da. But now you're starting to see even more people like Glenn Greenwald. I don't even know if Glenn's not on the right or also not necessarily, he's not a communist or anything like that either. But Glenn Greenwald has an audience that reaches different people. So there are some people that are on the right that do watch Glenn Greenwald's show. And I think he's been able to get through to some people about this. So the thing is, they see people like Glenn Greenwald as a threat. Ha 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 ha. David Pakman, who wants to flee the United States. Again, they don't see him as a threat. They see people like Glenn Greenwald as a threat. So pay attention to that. So you see everybody, more people are being more vocal about, they're like, no, this is ridiculous what Israel is doing, including some of those who are, on the right. I know Thomas Massey's a libertarian, but he aligns more on the right. So that's why they're panicking and freaking out. So just do the timestamp, guys. He goes on Tucker's show. He calls out Israel, also calls out Epstein, also calls out Israel surveillance. He calls all of that out. And then all of a sudden that video is leaked. What everybody should be focused on, instead of what they saw in that video, what they should be focused on is the fact that the video was leaked in the first damn place and how much they are watching you. The amount of surveillance that is on you and the fact that you don't really have privacy. And that should be the focus. So when I say the chickens have come home to roost, this is what I'm talking about. Israel has been exposed on the world stage for what it really is, and not just Israel, but also Israeli intelligence, and they can't take it. So again, I said, if Glenn Greenwald were here, when I saw it, I just said to myself, I wish I could just give Glenn Greenwald a big hug, because nobody wants to go through that. And what happened to him, it could happen to you. Let's go to some of the comments, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Juliet for the super sticker. Thank you. Isabel says, that's so low. We know exactly who is coward enough to do such a shitty thing. Yes, we do. Sane Man said, I am not even curious about Gigi's private life. He is a resourceful journalist and a fearless human being. Respect. Simply C, oh, that's definitely not a coincidence. Tucker has a huge platform too. Thanks, Tuxedo. Thoughts on the embassy pewing false flag? I made a video about that. Watch the video. R. Bailey says Jason Whitlock is the last person to talk. He's just mad that no matter how often anyone tries, he won't be caught doing anything but eat. That's kind of funny. Obsidian said, when I watch you speak, I get this trippy feeling of the 1980s culture of roller skates, bubblegum, and the electric boogaloo. Hey, that would be me, though. I like all of those things. Thank you, Perry. Looks like another false flag today in Boulder near Denver. Another so-called attack by an immigrant on the Jewish Zionists have reached the bottom of the barrel. Oh, I haven't seen this. Oh, that might be what he was talking about. I haven't seen it. I have to check. Sorry, guys. Marlon, the truth is anti-Semitic to Israeli killers. And Roger says this would have been scandal in 1960s. Today, it's just a dud. Thank you, man. Man with long last name, Israeli intelligence. Isn't that an oxymoron? You're funny. And let's get the comments on Rumble and we'll get on out of here. Thank you, Goo. Google has invested in Wix and Monday, which is two Israeli-owned internet companies. Google shares data to the Israelis when Americans use the services. You may notice they shove Wix in your face on YouTube. Interesting. Thank you for this one. Make sure to boycott Wix and Monday and Google, as you can use other search engines and email along with SodaStream, which is also Israeli-owned and have investment by Pepsi. I don't even think let me look up Wix because I'm curious now. Oh, it says it's a website builder. Oh yeah, it says it right here. It says Tel Aviv, Israel. Yeah, it does say that. Interesting, man. Crazy, crazy. I mean, Israel owns a lot of stuff. I hate to tell you guys this, but they own a lot of stuff. So Skylar said, oh, Wix is like WordPress. Oh, okay. I knew somebody would know this. Okay. Interesting. All right, guys, that is it for me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time today. I'll catch you live Tuesday evening. Jamal Thomas is going to join me, quite a bit to discuss, and we'll also have news as well. Oh, and thank you, Sarah. Until there are repercussions to the corruption, nothing going to change. We all screwed. Yeah. I think we need a mass movement. That's what I think. All right, guys, that's it for me. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.